And what is up, everyone? I am Joe the Host. I am the host of Beyond the Woodline, and I have with me tonight Barbara Fisher. How you doing, Barbara?
Hey, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Man, we were having a pretty good conversation before we came on the air. We could have done the show. We should have
I
started
know.
it then.
Yeah, that's what we. Now we'll just sit here and stare at each other and go,
Yeah, now we had nothing to
"Oh,
talk about. but
nah, I can always talk."
yeah. Oh yeah, me too. I was endowed with a gift of gab, so it's a good thing I'm doing this stuff. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, what got you started in all this weird, strange phenomenon, unsolved mysteries, and just all the weird things that goes on in this world that people don't talk about really.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's easy. I uh I can remember since I was about 3 having weird things happen. I'd see strange things that other people couldn't see, especially when I was younger. As I got older, other people would see them if they were there with me sometimes. But I had things like, kind of glowing sort of humanoid creatures sort of oozing through my walls and then staring at me because, that's a thing that's cool to do to a kid. Um and but it, my family also has a history of weird things happening, and we were open about it around the family, but not so much around other people. So, I wouldn't tell anybody at school except for like my one really good best friend. But people in my family did know some of the stuff that I saw and experienced. I grew up in West Virginia. The very first news story I remember hearing on the radio was the fall of the Silver Bridge. Because I remember it because my mother burst into tears. And I realize now why. At the time I just knew it was kind of strange for her to listen to the radio and burst into tears. Um my grandparents had a farm at that time in Mason County, and they crossed that bridge
Mm.
fairly frequently to go, over to Gallipolis and then back over to Point Pleasant. So she was afraid that one of her relatives or her parents or brothers was
Mhm.
on that bridge. And I didn't realize that that's where their farm was. The farm I remember when I was growing up was in Putnam County. So I kind of thought that the other farm had also been in Putnam County, but I was wrong. So that makes more sense now. Um, but their farm in Mason County, they had a lot of weird things happen. They had a case of ball lightning or something similar to it fly in through the screen door. And it was an orange, my mother described it as about the size of a basketball ball that hissed and sizzled and rolled about on the floor, didn't cause anything to catch fire, but it sounded like some kind of buzzing, humming, sizzling sound, like it was electrical, and then it just went through the open window and went back out. They never did figure out what that was. So, I heard stuff like that growing up.
What was the name of the bridge that collapsed again?
The Silver Bridge.
The Silver Bridge. And for those who don't know, what was that bridge? I guess connected to.
Uh, it went across the Ohio River, and it was a really beautifully built bridge. It was built in the early part of the 20th century. It was a kind of suspension bridge. And in the 1960s and 1967, the Mothman sighting started happening around Point Pleasant and Gallipolis. Point Pleasant was in West Virginia, and then across the river was Gallipolis, like directly across the river. This bridge connected two towns and kind of made them like one town. And
Right.
people who lived on one side worked on the other, back and forth all the time. And that's when those Mothman sightings started, and then all of these UFO sightings started happening around the same time. Men in Black sightings, all kinds of weird things were happening. That's when John Keel went to investigate, and 10 years later, he wrote the book, The Mothman Prophecies, and that's why people pretty much remember the Silver Bridge. But It was a tragedy. 50 some people died. It was in the Christmas season. It was right before Christmas.
Right.
And what's interesting is because of that tragedy, which was the worst bridge collapse in the United States up to that time, and I think still, as far as loss of life goes, they formed a federal law that says that bridges have to be inspected by federal inspectors, every 2 years or whatever it is, but that law came about because of that disaster.
And that all tied in with the Mothman. Was that necessarily something that was tied in with the Mothman?
Well, some people say that the Mothman was a harbinger of doom.
Right.
People like to say that it was a warning that something bad was gonna happen, or that it was a harbinger of death. I mean, because big red eyes, big gray black wings, that's creepy.
Right.
Yeah, clearly that's not a nice thing. But other people have said that they felt like it was more of a protective thing, that it was trying to warn them, not in a ghoulish way, but in a, "Hey, you be careful" kinda way.
Right.
And, but did he cause the bridge to fall? No, that was
Yeah.
an eye bolt that
Yeah.
was cracked, and I'm sure he did not go and, smack
Right.
that eye bolt around and make it crack. That was just a manufacturing defect that over decades finally weakened enough to fall apart. And
Mhm.
once that one little thing, it was really a small thing, once that one thing broke, that the whole thing just went.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I remember watching that movie, Mothman Prophecies, and that was pretty cool. And it's funny that, we didn't even talk about that before coming on the show, and I got my Mothman shirt on.
That's awesome. I
That's
almost
pretty,
wore mine, but I
that's
decided
good.
to wear I had this on, so I'm like, "Yeah, that's good enough."
Yeah, yeah, we had, like growing up, all the kids were, we were all into like the paranormal and UFOs and stuff like that. So when that movie came out, I don't even remember if we watched it on VHS at the time or if it was on cable or not. But yeah, that was a big deal for the kids, in the neighborhood to do.
Oh, yeah.
We probably watched that show 100 times or that movie 100 times. It was kind of creepy for a kid to watch.
Mhm. It's
What?
fairly subtle for a horror movie too,
Yeah,
but
yeah. What do you think the Mothman is, or is it still around? Do you think?
I have a friend who has seen it. I have 2 friends who have seen it. And I know that and they saw it in the 1990s. So, at
Okay.
least since the 1990s, it's been around. And I've also heard from, people who live in Point Pleasant who never stopped seeing it. It seems like if you see it once, then you tended to see it again, whether you talked about it or not. Um, what is it? See, I tend to think that paranormal things are some sort of, well, I think of them as beings of energy that can take solid form sometimes,
Mhm.
that they can morph back and forth. And I tend to think that they can take whatever form they feel like taking, and maybe they take ideas out of our heads as to what to look like.
Okay.
Like, I have this metaphor that our brains are like, closets or wardrobes for these creatures. And, they can sometimes just kind of reach in and go, "Oh, I'm going to look like an angel this time,"
Mhm.
or, "Oh, this one I'll look like a fairy," or, "This one I'm going to look like Mothman." But what's interesting about that is nobody had Mothman in their heads before they started seeing it. So,
Right.
which comes first? The chicken or the egg? And did Mothman come first, or the idea of Mothman?
Right.
Al Although he looks pretty demonic, so
Yeah. 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 That's interesting because we were talking about that too. In terms of the Bigfoot aspect, I always wonder if everything people see in the woods, if it's a Bigfoot or if it's something else, another entity. Um, and I was always from from the Flesh and Blood camp, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last, like I say, year and a half, I've kind of, I'm gonna say I changed my mind, but I've definitely opened up to the other aspects that maybe there's something else going on with Bigfoot itself. But I still believe that there's other things out there, other entities that can look like a Bigfoot if it wants to, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so I still believe that wholeheartedly, without a doubt. And I just think that maybe there's other things out there that get lumped in with Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was with you. I'm a child of the '70s and In Search Of
Hmm.
with Leonard Nimoy because
Right.
if Mr. Spock says it, then it's got to be true, right? Um,
Right. There you go.
and I remember seeing Patty in the Patterson Gimlin film on that show, and I remember looking at it. And they showed it a
Go ahead.
couple times, and she walks and then looks over her shoulder and keeps going. And I remember looking at it, and the first time I looked at it, I was like, "That looks real." And then the second time they showed it and they kind of zoomed in, I was like, "Hey, Dad, she's got boobies."
Right.
I was like 11 or 12, and he was like, "What?" And then he looks and he's like, "Oh, you're right." And then he said, "Who would put boobs on an ape suit?"
Right.
And then my mom, she actually starts to pay attention and she's like, "Oh, you both are full of crap in it." Oh, well, they kind of move like boobs do too, because she's the
Right.
boob expert, being, the full grown woman of the family. And so then we talked about it. We were like, well, then it's got to be real. Who would do that? How? And then in later years, I'm like, how would you weigh it? Weight it so that they move
Yeah.
like
Bounced
that.
around like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's as a mature owner of a pair of boobies,
Mhm.
I know how they move. And
Right.
so I look at that and I still look at it and go, "Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. That's what the yeah, that's how they move." And
That's what they do.
yeah, that's just how they are.
Yeah.
Um I I I also think it's kind of odd that the most famous film or video that we've ever anybody's ever shown is, Patty, and she's clearly female. But there's this kind of weird um feeling or expectation that Bigfoot's always male,
Right.
and that we when we do artistic representations, it's almost always male. Even
Right.
if it's based on that silhouette of Patty when she's, taking that stride with one arm forward, one arm back, the boobs are never in there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what's up
Yeah.
with
I've noticed
that?
that too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
what's happening with that?
Yeah.
Why? But I'm with you. I was always a flesh and blood. That's what they are. They're some kind of hominid. Maybe the Neanderthal didn't really die out, and we didn't, just mate with them. That there was a pocket of them, maybe, but I didn't think they were that big. But maybe there's something else. And now, I've seen enough evidence from people who have seen things, and then there's the whole issue of, you have one track or one footprint, like, or a footprint track that's of the right foot, but not the left foot. What's going on with that? Or you have tracks that just end in the middle of a field of
Yeah. Or
snow.
snow.
Yeah, snow, that's the worst.
Yeah.
What how does he have a jetpack? What's going on? So that's
Yeah.
where I, like you, have loosened way
Right.
up. And I've also read Stan Gordon's works and Tim Renner and Josh Cutchin's books where the footprints end. It was in reading that I just kind of went, yeah, yeah, yeah. There's something else
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah. There's got to be because I've talked to enough people who said that they will backtrack. But
hmm
how many times can you use that? You know.
yeah,
You know.
yeah,
Especially like
and
in deep snow, and it's
yeah,
like
that doesn't
I
make
want to
sense.
go back to the Patterson Gimlin film.
Mhm.
As much as I love that, I kind of wish the community would get away from it already because we've been researching that, we've been
Oh God, yes.
diagnosing it, we've been scrutinizing it all this time, and we're no closer as a community. And I mean, even people who are like non-believers who look into the Bigfoot phenomenon to say that's real or not real. Can we move
Hmm.
on to something else now?
Oh,
you
I
know,
know, right?
yeah, yeah. It's just
Now,
like
what
okay,
what kind of stuff do you do? Do you go out in the field and go on expeditions? What is it that you do?
yeah. My primary, I guess, research areas is the same as the forest, and
Mhm.
I go out there with a group of guys, and sometimes I go out there alone. I set up trail cams, recorders. Um, I try to go to locations that have had known sightings.
Mhm.
So that's what I try to do. I try to capture as much evidence as I can. Most of what I have is audio.
Mhm.
And I think that's going to be very vital in improving the existence of this creature. You
Mhm.
know, because even hair, it just comes back as unknown,
Yeah.
and you know,
If you
so okay,
don't have a sample that's known, how
right,
can you identify it?
right.
That's
But
I mean, I guess if you
with
got the same unknown fibers from around the world, maybe you
right,
could, but still,
yeah,
I agree with you that
yeah,
sound, and there's so many ways you can analyze sound as well
yeah,
that we couldn't do back in the 1970s or,
right.
even in the 80s and 90s that we didn't have this set up for.
Yeah. You look at frequencies, decibel levels, wavelengths, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Especially when you compare it to the known animals in the area, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
you have this one, and then I mean it's there, it's making the sound, and there are certain,
Yep.
like I said, levels that people can't do.
Yep.
Whether it's high or low, or other animals can't do. So there's got
Yep.
to be something out there making that noise, and even they're so good at saying, okay, well, this is definitely mechanical. This is some kind of motor going or whatever. They're so good
Mhm.
at analyzing these sounds, and then when it comes to this, like, I don't know what the hell that is. So I think that's going to be pretty, uh,
Exactly.
significant in improving. And I think I would tell people, man, set out more recorders. Just set more
Yeah.
recorders out.
Yeah.
On trail cams, we've had pictures that seem to just go off for no reason.
So
And
there's nothing there, but it went off with the
yeah,
motion sensor.
right.
Oh,
So
that's
we have a lot of
interesting.
that, and in the past when we had like the single shot, you know, uh, picture on something moved in front of it, you take one picture, you could
Right.
just say, well, something ran in front, and that was it.
Yeah.
But we have
Yeah, it
like
was going
video,
too
but
fast,
yeah, but now we have videos, multi bursts, and they go
Right.
off, and there's nothing there. So I always wonder about that.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah,
And you can set your motion detector level, so that it's not a bug that just
right.
and yeah, it's not
And
a
a lot of times we don't set our cameras like at ground level. Well, I still do in certain areas. I will set them up at ground level, but people can set them up in trees. So something's
Mhm.
passing, in front to set these things off. And so, so as much as I love trail cams, I don't know if trail cams are the answer, but I mean, I use them still. So I'm gonna,
That's kinda how I feel about my digital camera. Like, one of the things I have heard something that we decided was Bigfoot, um, and I didn't much care for it, really. It was very scary. Um, but most of what I experience is, uh, anomalous light phenomena, which means I see balls of light out in the woods, floating around, bobbing around, being weird balls of light in the woods. And I never tried to take pictures of them. I mean, I started seeing them in the 1990s, and we didn't have digital cameras back then. We had film cameras, and I never knew where mine was when, weird stuff started happening. It's not like, I carried it around with me everywhere I went. So, um, I never I just assumed that it was not gonna photograph. I mean, because Bigfoot, every time you try to take a picture, it's some blurry business. And if you try to take a picture of a UFO, it's blurry business. And so I just kind of was like, I'm not going to take a picture. Why would I take a picture? It's not going to prove anything to anybody. But last spring, I started seeing more manifestations of these lights in the woods. And I was like, I wonder if if the camera on my phone will see this. And so just to test it out, I was in the house looking out the window. I don't think I would have been as brave if I'd been like right there in the woods. I might not have done it. Probably would have dropped my camera and made a mess. Um, but I pulled it out and I was like, I'm just going to look through the camera and then look, you know,
Right.
with my eyes and look through the camera, and I'm going to compare and contrast. And I could still see it. So I was like, I am take a picture. And so I did. I took several, and it was interesting. It did take photographs of light. They were different than the way I saw them.
Hmm.
The colors were different. They weren't as bright. And the shape and movement that I was seeing was different than what was captured by the camera. And so I thought that was interesting.
Mhm.
And I've not shown it to a bunch of people because my feeling is it taught me what I needed to know. And what I needed to know was, are there actual photons of light out there interacting with the rest of the world?
Mhm.
It's not just in my head. It's not something that's just interacting with my eyes. It can also interact with a camera.
Mhm.
So physics says there are photons, real live ones that are over there, and they're interacting with my camera. But does it prove anything to anybody? No. I
Yeah.
mean, it could have been, oh, that could just be house lights, and I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, house lights don't move around, dude. Well, you
Yeah.
should have taken a video. Well, then you would have said, it's just some guy in the woods moving around.
Yeah.
Whatever. But my daughter also took some pictures last year, and I did do a little bit of work with those. And what she had seen that were two orbs about 100 feet up in the air that were red. And they were basically right over her head. What she saw is two orbs when she took a picture of it, and then I sat and played with it and looked at it. They actually weren't round according to the camera. They
Mhm.
were sort of blobby shaped,
Okay.
or they were changing shape when she pushed the camera button. And she said that when she got two pictures of them, and then one of them faded out and disappeared. And so when I saw that one of them was really deformed, it wasn't round at all. I said, was that which one was disappearing? And it was the one that was changing shape. And so I kind of wondered if it wasn't dissipating when she
Yeah.
took the picture. But again, I've put it up on the website for our podcast, and it doesn't prove anything to anybody. In fact, my daughter wrote a blog post about, why didn't you take a picture of it?
Mhm.
And the answer is, well, what would that prove? That's not going to prove anything to you,
Right.
except that there was a light.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing about whether it's paranormal, Bigfoot, UFO, or any other strange phenomena, any picture that you put up is going to be scrutinized and questioned and criticized, which I don't mind. I think it's good to have a healthy back and forth. But you always have the ones who just like, either you're crazy or you're made it up or it's not what it is, and so you're not going to make everyone happy.
No,
And
no,
then you have
you're
the
not.
ones who take a picture. I saw this picture the other day of someone who took a picture. She was a widow. Her husband had passed away, and there was like this little light next to her kid's head, and she
Hmm.
was saying that was her husband's spirit, right? But the candle on the clay on the cake was clearly the same light.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can't tell people like that. That's not what it
No,
is, because
no.
So I just kept on scrolling on and left it
Yep,
alone.
I ain't gonna say, not gonna
Yeah,
say a thing.
yeah,
Again, that's not kind. Always proceed with kindness.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. And if you're gonna do it, you have to do it uh, in a responsible way. I think because I do have friends. They're like, "Hey man, look, check this out. You know, we're going out to the woods," and they're like, "Man, look at this. You know, look at this marker." And, you know, I'm like, "Dude, that's not what that is. You know, that's not what that is. It's hogs. Hogs made that. Or, you know."
Yeah,
So
I know.
you know,
I know.
you know, and
I've
after I, you know, and but it's happened to me too. You know, I sent stuff out to my friends who are hunters and people who are better woodsmen than I am, and hey man, check out this noise. I heard this noise, and like, dude, this is it. You know, so I'm careful about what I put out there, careful about
Yeah,
what I release. You know, and
yeah,
so I think we need to become better as a community when it comes to helping each other out. You know, if you really want to help somebody out, there's a way to do it without being an asshole about it. You know,
yeah. Don't be obnoxious.
right,
I don't like people that are competitive in that way. That they have to break someone down to push themselves up and feel.
right,
But I don't have time for that. It's really annoying and mean spirited. And I never got into this to be mean spirited about
right.
anything. Um, but yeah, Bigfoot is still the one thing that I do think that there is something solid going on. I think
Mhm.
that there is something physical, whether it's physical all the time or not. I don't know. I don't know, but I know that when I heard the howling in my woods, that there was something physical making that noise. It was so loud and so my husband is a musician. Um, he hates thinking about this, but he had all of this recording equipment upstairs in our house. He could have opened the window and started it, but
Right,
just like people who have a camera around their necks and they see a UFO, they don't take a picture because they're standing there going, "Oh my god, what is that?" That's what
right,
he was doing. He was just standing on the porch going, "What is that? What is that?" You
right.
know? So, but whatever it was huge and it was loud and it was running about. I could see it. Something was shaking the trees about 60 feet from our house. It was creepy.
Mhm. Yeah, I
And
don't think people realize that when you run into a creature like this or you see something like that, the last thing on your mind is I need to document this. You know?
I know, right? And I didn't even have a good a good flashlight. I felt like Mulder and Scully. How they
Right,
always have crappy flashlights. It's like, look, guys, you've been FBI agents doing this for how many years now, and you still have the crappiest flashlights in the world. What's wrong with you? But
right,
here I am. As soon as I find the flashlight and I'm trying to flash it, it dies. The battery just dies, and it was crappy to start out with, and I was just like, oh, just as bad as Mulder and Scully and crap flashlight. I can't see anything.
right.
But yeah,
So,
you don't think about it until later.
so do you go out and investigate or do any kind of research yourself, or
Mostly I just experience weird
okay,
stuff and then investigate that. But I have gone into places or situations where people have said, there's something weird here. I want you to look at it, see if you can figure out what it is. And that's okay. That's not a problem. But I don't have a lot of equipment. Um and even if I did, I'd probably mess it up because I have this tendency with electronic equipment to just it doesn't last long around me. It just doesn't. Um Batteries die really easily around me, so I don't I do kind of want to uh an IR camera though. And I kind of want an EM meter, but I still haven't done that. Mostly I just go places and then see how I feel. I'm not a psychic, like I don't talk to spirits really. I'm not one of the people in the ghost hunting shows who'd be like, "Oh, there are spirits here and they're telling me things," because I don't think they talk to me. I'm not that kind of person, but I can go in and go, "Yeah, this feels weird." There's a strange feeling And if there is something there, it tends to be if I'm around or my daughter Morgana is around, it'll it'll show up and
Mhm.
do something, so we can, not I'm not saying we manifest things, but weird stuff happens in our vicinity fairly frequently. So,
Yeah. Where do you sit on people that claim to manifest things, or people that actually do manifest? I mean, do you think that's a thing that does
it's
happen?
it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's possible. Um I was about to say, the easiest way for me to manifest something is to say it's not going to happen, or, that's impossible, or y- you know how people in the ghost hunting shows go into a place and start yelling at the
Right.
ghosts?
Right.
Yeah. I I wouldn't do that. Um I think that's rude, actually.
Right.
If you actually think ghosts are dead humans, why are you treating them badly? Be Would you do that to a living human? Would you go into their house and start yelling at them so they, I don't know, jump up and cuss you out or whatever? No, you wouldn't. So why are you doing it to dead humans? If you
Right. Right.
don't think they're dead humans, then that begs the question of what are they, and do you really want to upset something
Right.
that isn't a dead human?
Yeah.
So,
Rile it up. Right.
yeah, why wind it up, It's not let's this is not a good idea. Let's not go there.
Yeah.
Um, I think, I do know that people can manifest things. I just
Mhm.
don't do that myself,
Right.
I think it's a bad idea.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think people have actually done it on accident. I've talked to people who have
Yes.
joking around and playing around, and they've called
Mhm.
in an entity that they were like, "Holy crap! I didn't know this thing was a real thing." And I've told a story before, but I had a friend of mine who was messing around in a house that they had just rented. The first night they were there, um, the previous, well, the owner of the house, like I said, they were renting it out to the guy's daughter. He had committed suicide,
Oh.
and they didn't find this out until they were moved into the house that he had,
Oh.
So he was messing with his wife. He was turning the lights off and on. Jack's gonna get you. Jack's gonna get you. And man, that just whatever happened, they wound it up, and yeah, they had
Yeah.
to wind up getting out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I moved into a a haunted duplex without knowing that it was weird, and the very first night I was there, um, my roommate and I, we hadn't been able to get the heat turned on before we got in the house, so there's no electricity, there's no heat. We did have water, that's something, um, and it was early April, so it was really cold still, in West Virginia, occasionally, you'll get a good cold snap in April, and so we ended up sleeping in the same room, same bed. I had on, all my long underwear and a big nightgown, and, like, we had all the covers from both beds on top. We were just, like, shivering. My cat was laying on top of us, and we were still cold, and we were just sitting in there, and we'd just fallen asleep, and my cat starts to growl, and, I start hearing stuff moving around downstairs. It sounded like boxes being and furniture being moved, and I was like, I didn't think of a ghost. I was like, "Oh my god, somebody's been squatting here," and they
Oh,
were in the basement, and
right.
oh my god, and she woke up, and she grew up in a big city, so she was like, "Oh no. Oh, this is bad. This is bad." So, I had a really big knife that I had next to me when I slept anyway, so I'm pulling that out, and she's reaching over, and she's getting a like a baseball bat, so we're like, we're ready,
Right.
and my cat goes over to the door, which is closed, and she just stands there all puffed up, and we hear footsteps coming up the steps, and I'm like, "No, no," and so I stood up and was kinda crouched next to the door, and I said, "When the door opens, you stay behind it, and I'll jump out, and we'll be okay. And if I don't scare him, you can whack him with the baseball bat." And she's like, "Cool," because she was bigger than me. She was a healthy girl. She's a big farm girl. And so we're waiting, and the footsteps stop right at the door, and my cat just puffed up and just made horrible, awful noises. And then the footsteps went down the hall to my friend's room and walked around there, and then started coming back down. And I was like, "Okay, we're probably okay. Why isn't it opening the door?"
Mhm.
And it didn't even touch the doorknob. It stopped. The cat yowled, and then it started to go down the stairs. And I opened the door by the time it was like halfway down the stairs, so that I could see who or what it was. There was no one there. And I could still hear footsteps going down the steps. And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, no, that's not cool at all." I was like, "That is not cool." That is so not cool. And it would never bother a room that cat was in, but every night it was walking up and down and around.
Hmm.
And once we had the heat on and the electricity, my friend would be in her room, and we called him the Stomper. The Stomper would come up the stairs and walk around her bed, and she'd yell down the hall, "Bring the cat!" And said, "Bring the cat." Go, "Here you go." And then the cat would chase it out. And we
Hmm.
actually talked to the lady who lived on the other side of the duplex, and she had like some kids, and she's like, "So how are y'all doing? There?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, we don't sleep a lot." And she's like, "Oh, why not?" And I said, "Well, we call him the Stomper. There's something in there that makes noise." And she said, "Yeah." She said, "The last 2 families that lived here, the last one that lived here left in the middle of the night and came back and got their stuff a week later."
Oh wow.
She said, "The people before them just kind of broke their lease, packed up and left." And they lost their security deposit, and they said they just didn't care. They weren't gonna stay there anymore. I was like, "Oh, well, gee, thanks." Huh. And she said, "So are you girls gonna be okay?" I'm like, "Well, if it's just a ghost, I don't care." I was worried that it was a person,
Right.
you know? I mean, yeah, sure, it's still creepy to have disembodied person walking around, but he's not gonna try to murder us, so,
Hmm.
why worry?
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have seen those horror movies and all,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, so
Did
that's
y'all have
creepy.
anything other than that? Like,
The footsteps, we had stuff move and
okay,
disappear and then
right.
reappear, you know? Um, that's when I got into the habit of, if something that I knew where it had been I'd go to get it and it wouldn't be there. Like in the kitchen, if I was making something and a saucepan or a utensil was not where I'd left it, I would just talk to the air and say,
Mhm.
"Okay, that's funny. Give it back." And
Right.
then, an hour later, it would be in some stupid place. Like, I'm not gonna carry a clean kitchen spoon into the living room and leave it on the couch.
Right.
I'm not gonna do that. But
Hmm.
apparently, the Stomper thought that was really
The
funny, so
stomper. I like
yeah.
that. The stomper.
Yep. He never had a name other than the Stomper.
Hmm. Did it sound like work boots or just footsteps or
It sounded like a heavy set person.
okay, okay. All right, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
There was a slight drag on one of the feet. That
Hmm.
was one thing we noticed, that it sounded like the person limped,
Okay. Okay.
because the first night I heard that stomp, scrape, I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
it's got a limp.
yeah.
Uh, we
He's
should
about
go
to
for
have
the
another one if he
knees."
comes in here, right?
It's like, "We should go for the knees, honey." We'll
Yeah,
get
yeah,
him if we go for the knees.
yeah, yeah. That's funny. Yeah, I lived in a house and we would hear footsteps, but it was a so specific sound. It sounded like someone like in work boots,
Yeah, yeah.
and we would hear that, and that's what it sounded like someone who, excuse me, someone who had on work boots, and I always thought it was my dad coming. coming around to visit.
Yeah.
So I had some experiences with that. I think my dad was around for a couple of years after. But yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
interesting. A heavyset person, I could totally hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had that one drag on one of his feet,
Hmm.
or him. I assume it's a him because it did sound, women have a different rhythm to their walk. It sounded like somebody
Yeah.
who walked very deliberately, kind of
Hmm.
slowly, and was heavy set.
Hmm.
At least we didn't hear weird breathing. That I think that would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
it would have.
Or kept their hands to themselves.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there was no grabby, pinchy,
Yeah.
pokey, none of that.
Yeah. What
Um,
in
which is
that
good.
same house that I lived in, everyone had been like tapped on the shoulder or poked in the ribs. I've been poked in the ribs. Yeah. Or I had my like someone slapped the side of my pillow. I was laying on my back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, what the hell was that? You
Yeah.
know.
That's
But
not. That's yeah.
well, I don't think it was had any ill intent. I think whatever it was just fooling around. We
Yeah.
never felt threatened. We never did. And I think there was a couple of other people there that the previous owners of the house actually. Um, but yeah, nothing like scratched us or hit us or pushed us down the stairs or threw glasses or whatever. It
Yeah.
was the only time something happened was when my cousin came to do some remodeling, and the night before he was telling us about what he was going to do. He was kind of going over, we're going to come in tomorrow. This is what we're going to do, and going through all the phases of the work. Um, he kept looking down at his arm and holding his arm, and he was like, "What the hell's going on?" And he was looking at my other cousin who was standing off a little bit to the side, and uh, but he was too far away to actually grab my cousin. And he tells me, he goes, "Dude, something's grabbing my arm," and he was squeezing his arm, and he kept talking, and he kept looking at his arm, and finally he walks across the kitchen to me, and he grabs my arm and goes, "Dude, it feels like this," and he squeezes the hell out of my arm, right?
Oh wow.
The next morning when he came in to start work, he says, "Hey, come here and check out my arm." And on his arm, he had 4 fingerprint bruises, like 4 fingers.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but that was the only thing, and I could understand that. Like I said, I think it was the previous owners that were there. They're
And
like,
they
"Hey, don't
didn't
mess with
want
our stuff." Yeah.
yeah, they didn't want the house changed. Yeah, that's one of the times when weird stuff will happen is if you start changing things in your house that you'll have, you know, you'll stir something up and they'll get cranky and
Yeah.
start doing the I have been touched by non-corporeal things, but I've never been violently touched like that.
Right.
And that was I mean, it was bad enough because there was nobody else. It was when I was at work one time and there was
Mhm.
nobody else in there with me. And somebody just reached out and touched me between the shoulder blades.
Mhm.
And I was like, I know there's nobody here.
Yeah.
And, I just kind of peeked around and went, oh, nope, there really isn't anybody here. Okay. That's a little bit weird. I don't like that. Okay. I'm going to go back to washing these dishes now. Think about something else. If it happens again, well, I'll go take the trash out and go outside and maybe it'll go away. And
Yeah, we used to always kind of joke around there at the house. Like, was like, "Hey, look, if you're gonna be here, can you help with the dishes or something?"
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't be like the stomper and stealing things out of the kitchen and putting it in stupid places like the bathroom
Yeah,
or the living room.
and here at this place that I'm at now, I've had some weird stuff happen. And here recently, I had some tweezers, and I always keep the tweezers on my sink. And I went to go use them one day, and they weren't there. And I'm like, "Oh, where the hell are these doggone tweezers?" So I had another pair, and I wound up using those. And uh, 3 days later, it was like morning time. I brush my teeth at night, right? Of course. In the morning time, I brush them again. I went to the sink, and those tweezers that I couldn't find were in the sink, along with my razor that I used in the shower.
Oh.
Yeah, it was in the sink, and I'm like, where the heck did this tweezers and my shaver? Why is it my shaver? If I show you right now, my shaver it's on the shower caddy. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't come out of the shower unless I change the blade, and it's definitely going right back in the shower. But I would
That's
never ever
yeah.
put it in the sink.
Somebody needed to remove some spiritual hair in some way. Some spirit just,
Yeah,
hair grows after you die, so
yeah, maybe. Yeah, yeah. They're like, oh, good, this guy's got some tweezers and a shaver. We're gonna groom today.
yeah, exactly. We're gonna
Yeah,
be all
yeah,
nice looking in the
yeah,
afterlife.
yeah. Well, they didn't want to scare me. Big
Mhm.
hairy guy I see, so
There he
that was
is,
nice of
Bigfoot,
him.
just
Yeah.
plucking hair out of his ears.
Mhm. There you go. There you go. Yeah,
It's hard to hear when there's
yeah,
too much.
yeah. So yeah, you and I we met in our group.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
um, and of course we have a bunch of other people in our group chat that thing goes off constantly. You know,
Yes, it does.
it does, but
There's always
it's
action.
yeah, but it's a fun group to be a part of. Um, I enjoy it. I enjoy Zuri very much. She's a great person. We've chatted before off air. What is the name of the group that we're in again? Appalachian. Um,
Folklore, cryptids and folklore, or the other way
yeah,
around?
I'm looking it up right now. I believe it's Appalachian Cryptids of Folklore. You might be right about that. Um, but it's a great group that we're in. I love uh, the majority of the people that post stuff. We don't always get the best.
Occasionally we get some real
Some
doozies, but most
trolls
of the
and
people are cool.
yeah, yeah. So I definitely recommend people if you want to look into that. The Appalachians Cryptids and Folklore and a lot of
Yeah.
like-minded individuals and people who have stories or uh, you know even I guess I don't really want to call them myths about the Appalachians. Or
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun reading that goes on in there, and so I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
People come out and tell their stories. Some people have some pretty cool stories. I actually like that stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like to hear what people have experienced. That's why, I started a podcast, and I get to hear really great stories from people all the time, and
Hmm.
that's mostly what I did as a kid. Um, we weren't dirt poor. We were a little bit above dirt poor. We were kinda medium poor for a while.
Dust poor.
Yeah, yeah, middle area poor. And then we became solidly middle class, but when I was really, really little, we didn't do a lot. We just basically went to relatives' houses, and then the adults would talk, or they'd play cards and talk, drink beer, and the kids would just, we'd play. But, we also like to listen to the adults talk.
Hmm.
Especially
Right.
if I was the only kid there, if we weren't there with my cousins, so I didn't really have anybody to play with. So I'd sit and listen to the adults talk, and, if they forget there's a kid in the room, they will tell the most amazing stories,
Right. Right.
creepy ones,
Right.
and it's awesome. And
Mhm.
that's what, being a podcaster is kinda like. You get to hear the stories that, I was sneaking to hear when I was a kid, but now I
Mhm.
get to hear it for legit, for true.
Right. Well, that's what got me involved in all this stuff. I had a neighbor, and that's what he would talk about this so much. I don't know where he got all these stories from, but he would talk about everything from uh, UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot, paranormal stuff. He would tell us all these stories, and that's what got me. I was a little kid. I was maybe 9, 10 years old, and that's what really got me hooked. He got me hooked on this stuff, and I have him a thing for it.
Yeah.
And but we have I guess a comment. Lisa McDonald has. I have wondered if poltergeists are actually demons. What do you think?
Are actually what?
Demons?
Demons? They
Yeah,
might be.
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing is you get poltergeist activity that is fairly clearly someone who's alive who has repressed emotions. I don't think that's the case all the time. I know that parapsychologists, came up with that theory and then pretty much were like, it's solved. It's pubescent girls that have repressed sexuality,
Hmm.
and they're growing up fast and they don't like it, and so they set the house on fire with their minds. That's the typical thing. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but i- in my experience, I have been around some people who did have repressed anger mostly, and weird things happen in the house, like things moving and, breaking and, getting flung against the walls and stuff. And, so that can happen. And then if you do believe in ghosts of dead humans, then it could also just be a ghost
Right.
who's maybe you're having something done on your house and, he doesn't like your cousin telling you all about it. And so he reaches out and grabs. I count that as a poltergeist thing
Right.
at, being grabbed.
Right.
Sometimes it could be some kind of trickster spirit that
Mhm.
just likes to play jokes on people, like the stomper grabbing my spoons and stuff and putting them in stupid places in the house. I guess to him that was funny.
Right.
And it was kind of funny after a while. I got used to it, So that's when I started, like I said, I would just talk to the air, stomper, come on, give it back. I don't know where you put my wooden spoon, but it doesn't belong wherever you put it, and then I'd find it and it would be in a stupid place. It was almost like he was playing hide and seek with me. But then you could have demons. I just, you don't know what it is.
Oh, can you read that comment?
Let me see.
It says, I don't believe that ghosts are disembodied human spirits. I saw levitation at a slumber party, and my reaction was anger at that demonic spirit that was touching my friend. She dropped like a sack of potatoes.
Yeah, see, that doesn't sound like a nice spirit at all.
Right.
Grabbing people and floating them is not a cool thing to do ever. And you used your anger and it got it to let go of your friend. So that's cool. Um, you could also do, prayer often works. Even I've heard from people that it will stop alien abduction in its tracks if you
Really?
pray. Uh-huh.
Huh.
I've even heard that people who aren't believers in whatever religion
Right.
will pray and it still works. So, however it works, it works.
She says, my thought was, how dare you?
Yeah.
Huh. How old were
That's the
you,
way to
Lisa? If you
be.
don't mind me asking, when this event took place, how old were you when this happened? But yeah, so real quick, why don't you tell everybody about your podcast?
Oh, okay. So my podcast is called The 6 Degrees of John Keel. And you can find us at 6degreesofjohnkeel.com. It's 6 like the number, and then the rest of it is spelled out. It's about 13. Well, you did the right thing, Lisa.
Yeah.
It worked. So, and nobody died, so you did it right. And we talk about all kinds of stuff. Mostly we do stuff with people who have experienced things that are unusual. We have experiencer stories, but we also talk with investigators and people who have written books or who have theorized about, the paranormal and what all's going on. We talk about all kinds of things. We talk about Bigfoot. We talk about fairies. We talk about anomalous lights. We did a Bigfoot show last year that we called the Sexy Synctastic Big Sasquatch, and that was fun. It was 3 women all kind of talking about Bigfoot and sexuality. Because, if it is a flesh and blood creature, that's how it's going to reproduce.
Right.
So we need to look at it that way if we're going to look at it scientifically. But we also looked at the folklore of wild men in the woods. So we talk about all kinds of stuff. It's pretty crazy. You can find us on Apple Podcast and you can find us on Spotify and Stitcher and on our own website.
Seems normal that Bigfoots would make. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll get you in trouble though if you're talking about it with some people who are really prudish and they get all weird. They get very weird.
Yeah. Cool. 50 years. What's this one? 50 years with Bigfoot addresses that. Okay.
Yes, it does. I haven't read that whole book, but I have seen the book. I think my daughter has it now. But my daughter is one of the other hosts. She's 30, so it is still two adults. And yeah, we just talk about a lot of strange stuff. So
That's good that she's involved with that.
yeah, yeah. Well, we both experience weird things, so that's why we do this. Oh, and if anybody wants to be on the show, if they want to talk about their experiences, our email address is 6djk67@gmail.com.
Repeat it one more time.
6djk67@gmail.com.
Okay. That's quite the email.
Yeah, I know, right? It's better than 6 degrees of John Keel at
I was trying to say,
Gmail.
what the heck is that? Okay.
Yeah,
Now it makes sense.
yeah, now it does make sense.
Okay, now it makes sense. It does sound like one of those randomly computer generated.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Unless you're looking at the podcast's
Right.
name, it doesn't
Okay.
really make sense. 67 is from 1967 when the Silver Bridge collapsed. Gmail wouldn't let us just do 6DJK. They were like, no, it needs to have some more things to get it now.
Okay.
I'm like, darn. Okay, we'll use 67.
Cool.
So
Well, cool. We're at the end of the show. Do you have any words for our audience? Any insightful words? Any words of wisdom you want to part with
words of wisdom.
Yeah.
Well, don't follow the lights in the woods. Don't get so curious that you follow them. That's something that Native American people told the colonists years and years ago, and it's good advice for pretty much everybody.
Don't follow the lights in the woods. I like that. Well, cool. Do you have anything else you want to add, or anything else you want to promote, or?
Right now, I can't think of anything. I'll think of something at 3:00 in the morning.
Oh, I could have said that.
Yeah. I could have said that thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
thank you for asking.
Yeah, I'm glad you joined. I was always asking the guys in our group chat, the guys and gals in our group chat, and I know yesterday we had a little miscommunication there. I'm sorry about that.
That happens. It's okay.
Well, thanks for being a good sport, and I appreciate it very much.
Time zones suck.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Hey, thank you, Lisa, for participating and commenting. I certainly appreciate that. And thank you. I'm not sure who you are. I probably know you, but I'm sorry. Well, cool. With that being said, we'll talk to you guys later. I have a show on Tuesday, and I'll see you guys then. And this is Barbara. Hold on real quick, and I want to talk to you after. Okay.
All right.
Good night, everybody.